Sometimes being in the right place at the right time can change your future. When I asked Glenn about purchasing the Timberwolves, it wasn't his love for sports or something that he had planned or even anticipated. He was simply helping with a negotiation and doing his part. Those negotiation skills would lead to the opportunity to purchase the team. After a thorough review with a few handwritten notes, Glenn would shake hands on the deal that would keep the Timberwolves in Minnesota and lead to a very entertaining phone call to the NBA.
The purchase of the Timberwolves was really, again, quite unusual. What happened there is that I received a phone call from the governor, and of course, as being the leader in the Senate and in the Republican Party, and Arnie Carlson being a Republican, we were very close and working together in the Senate. And he asked me if I would come up and meet with the owners of the Timberwolves and a party from Minnesota that was willing to purchase the Timberwolves and help get the deal done. They had been on it for a long time, and they just didn't know if they were going to get the deal done. And he says it was in the interest of Minnesota to get this done. Of course, I drove up there. I did not know either of the owners. I did not know the party that was going to purchase them. I put the two groups in different rooms and kind of got their side of the story of what they thought they could do and how they would do it, and etc. Then I would go over to the other side and talk to the other group and kind of say, well, this is what these guys are thinking, and could you guys adjust to that? And etc. I went back and forth and back and forth. What I found out is that by being up there all week, that it really wasn't, the owners didn't participate. They should have been there and they should have participated, but they left all the discussion up to lawyers and the accountants. And I could see that they were spending all their time on stuff that wasn't really important, and they weren't getting done. I would call it a waste of time. In other words, what I was hoping for is that the owners would agree to something and then direct the accountants and the lawyers to write up some type of contract that would fulfill all the obligations that they had made. After staying up there all week and working with them, I came away with the conclusion that they were never going to get the deal done, that they had gotten so far off track here and arguing over little teeny issues that weren't really important. So I went home after that with the thought that it probably wasn't going to get done. But I didn't say that to them. I encouraged them to keep working. About 2 weeks later, it was reported that the deal fell apart and there was no deal. That was on Sunday that I heard it. On Monday, I received a phone call from one of the owners who said that, Glenn, you are the first guy in the 3 years we've been trying to sell it that seemed to know how to get a deal done, even though we didn't get one done. Would you be interested in purchasing the Timberwolves? I had never really thought about it, of doing such a thing, except now I had been in both parties' rooms and I knew what had to be done to get the deal done. So on Tuesday, we went up to the cities, divided up the responsibilities. I would take the political, Rob would take the marketing, Alan and Roger would take the finance, and Jack would take on the legal stuff. We worked on this. We got together on Thursday night. It was late, about 2 o'clock in the morning, made a decision that we should make an offer and put it together, what we would do. Left a call for the parties that we would be ready in the morning to meet with them over in their law office, and went over there. We went over there. They had a bunch of lawyers, a bunch of accountants, and we had our group chit-chatted for a while and then said, okay, let me tell you what our offer. Well, it takes me about 1 minute to explain our offer to them. And the only thing I noted was that the owner that had called me, he had a number 10 envelope. And as I'm writing on my sheet of paper, he's making notes on his number 10 envelope. We then just sat there, and it was just quiet a little bit, except that their lawyer, one of their lawyers, asked, well, where's the agreement? I said, I just gave it to you. You have copies? Well, if you guys want to make a copy, it's an outline on this 8.5, 11. And I wasn't making light of it, but that's all I had. But I says, here's the deal. And we sat there a while, and the owner got up. He was on the other side of the table and walked all the way around the table. I got up. When he got to me, he put out his hands, and I took his hand. We shook, and he says, well, you're the owner. And so that was it, you know. And so, and we're done with it. It's yours. And kind of from that, I kind of said, well, you guys have the number for the NBA, because I never talked to the NBA, never told them that I was interested. They don't even know who I am. Of course, they had that phone number. They gave it to me, but it was a receptionist. So when I called out there, I got a hold of the receptionist, and I said, I'm Glen Taylor. I'm calling because I just purchased the Timberwolves, and I need to talk to somebody as to what I'm supposed to do next. And she sort of laughed, and she said, yeah, we get quite a few of these calls. And I said, no, really, it happened. But I said, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I says, you take this information to whomever you choose. You choose the person, probably somebody with authority, and tell them that you got this phone call and I said, you tell them that they can call anybody they know in Minnesota, and they could ask that person, who is Glen Taylor? And I said, I'll just leave it at that, and I'll bet you they'll call me back. And she said, you should do that. And I got a call back from this guy. He says, kind of that we have this phone call, and this is what you said. Yes. And what's your name? Glen Taylor. And he says, well, my name is Adam Silvers, and I'm an aide to the commissioner, and he asked me to check into this. So he says, go over their story again. So I went over it and told it, a short story. And he says, okay, let me talk to the commissioner. And it was just a few minutes, he called back, and he says, are you at a place, you know, that I can meet with you? And I said, well, I'm in a hotel room in the cities right now, calling you. He says, okay, I'm to get on the next plane and fly out there. And if you stay in that room, I'll meet you. So, you know, that took about 5 hours for him to get on a plane and do all that. And he got there, and he came to the room, and he sort of had me tell the story over again. and I did that. And we laugh at it because it was just a real little room with a bed in it, because that's all I needed. And we both sat on the bed, and we're talking about this Timberwolf deal. And I went through the story and who I was and my history and all that. And he says, okay, give me a minute. And of course, he's sitting right there beside me. So he calls up the commissioner, and all he says is, Commissioner, I think we found the guy that we've been looking for 3 years. So he says, you know, I'm going to stay here and talk to him a little bit, and we'll get the deal done. Sort of based upon that, we didn't have any documents or anything for sure. We just verbally had a verbal agreement between myself and the other owner of how we would run it, because we were just down to a few employees. Everybody else had left because they thought the team was going to go to New Orleans and had quit. So we started to hire back people and get it going. And then I had to go out there, kind of do it backwards, is go to the board and to get approval from the board and all that to own the Timberwolves. But it all happened within a week from a time that it never occurred to me that I would own them till I had the rights to own them. So it was, That was an exciting time and a lot of hard work.
It was probably as simple as any of the acquisitions we'd done. And that doesn't mean it didn't have its own twists and turns with the league and learning all that space, but realistically, it was a comparable size business to many of our other acquisitions. At the time we bought it, it was not that big. But it was unique. I mean, because there's so few pro sports teams and so few sports transactions, it was really unique. So it was personally fun and satisfying, but it wasn't particularly complicated.
But I knew exactly how to get the deal done. That was, up until that point, I didn't know. But you're asking people, what price would you take? They tell you, they tell me. They don't tell the guys that they're trying to. They tell me exactly what it is. So I knew all that stuff. I did a couple of things that made a big difference. I let them keep 10% of the club. And that was really important to them. I said, yeah, you guys can keep 10%. You brought them to Minneapolis. You started them. You have the right. You can keep your seats. You sit on the court. I'm not taking away your seats. You get the good seats. A bunch of little things that I said like that. I know that just treating them with respect. Now, it wasn't very much longer. They kept the seats or the ownership, but then they sold it. They sold it back. They didn't keep it very long. They needed the money. But just that the right that they had it for a little while was enough to gain their respect.
We had to show them that we could afford the rent. This was when, Harvard Marv owned the arena. And when we did the deal, we needed the Metropolitan Sports Facility Commission to take over the facility. And then we would pay rent for our usage of it. And so I was involved with that and coming up with the projections. They worked pretty good until Kevin Garnett got his raise.
So the day comes and they make the announcement. Well, this was a big, big deal because it was such a surprise. Who is Glen Taylor? A lot of the media up in Minnesota, who is this guy? A Minnesota guy, fairly successful. He's going to buy the Timberwolves. Who is he? And their phones were literally ringing off the hook. And as I'm sure you heard the story, the helicopters are coming in and landing in a little meadow next to Taylor Corporation so that they can interview different people.
He had no agenda. I think because of how it got brought to him. More importantly, the fact that he was involved in helping keep the team, but not thinking he'd be the owner of the team. I think that he had no agenda, which is very unusual. Everyone has an agenda. If I buy this, how much money will it be worth in 10 years? If I buy this, what kind of profile will it mean for my other businesses, for my own brand? Glen had no agenda. He is such a humble, approachable, kind person, shrewd, incredible businessman, will beat you on any deal as long as he thinks it's fair on both fronts. That's critical to him. But he had no agenda. And so by approaching it that way, they really believed, the league and others around him, that there couldn't have been a better ambassador to take on the ownership structure, the ownership responsibilities than Glen Taylor, because his sole motivation was about the state of Minnesota. His sole motivation was around making sure it didn't leave. He wasn't thinking in that moment, in 1994, that teams would be valued at $2.5 to $4 billion 25 years later, right? Someone with an agenda who knew that would have been approaching it so differently. I don't even think he looked at it like this is going to be a profitable asset. This is long before the TV contracts had come into play. This is long before the teams were doing what they were doing on a local level. This is long before some of the things that the league did at a global level to globalize the game ever came to fruition. Glen Taylor had no agenda other than to save the team from leaving. And boy, what a pure state to be in to start this journey that he started, 25 or so years ago.
Once he pulled the trigger, he did something interesting. He pulled the ownership team together, the senior leadership team, and he said, okay, we have to be careful here because this is going to be exciting and it could distract us. So Greg and Al and I will work on the Timberwolves, and the rest of you will keep running the keep running the company, keep your focus. Again, brilliant. I mean, it would have been so easy for everybody to get wrapped up in that, in the let's just say the excitement and the hoopla around this professional basketball team. But he was good about bringing us to practices and keeping us informed of what was going on, and let us kind of share in the fun of it. And I thought, again, just another example of how Glen led.
That's a board of governors of people that are other billionaires. And for about the first year or two, he goes to the meetings, and I don't think he participates a lot when he's asked. And then all of a sudden, after a couple of years, suddenly he's asked to be on the key committees, and pretty soon he's president for a number of years. And they ask him to, well, serve another term, serve another term, serve another term. They knew they had a great business mind and somebody that had good common sense.